David, it's great to have you here. Tell me, how did you connect with the story of Brian Cleaver?
Brian wandered in off the street literally when I was giving a masterclass in Fremantle to 30 erstwhile filmmakers who wanted to get the tricks of the trade of how to make documentaries. He started to talk about being a conscript in Vietnam and about a big battle that took place that nobody knows about, and bodies buried in a big mass grave in a B-52 bomb crater, and that they were the enemy. He spoke about when in 2002, having been finally after 30 years diagnosed as having post-traumatic stress, that he had to do something about it because the medications weren't really working well, and he decided to go back to Vietnam on a tourist visa. He was scared, like a lot of vets, that there might be revenge taken upon him, and hadn't realised that Vietnam, like the rest of the world, had moved a long way in the 30-odd years since he'd fought in the war. He went actually back to the battleground, which is now an overgrown rubber plantation, and he met a local party secretary who said, as they got to know each other, we've got a record of 42 of our boys being killed and buried somewhere on this battlefield of an old swamp called Bao Hung. And Brian said, we actually buried 42 enemy soldiers on that battleground, and maybe I can help you. So that began his journey towards healing and towards helping them in the search for the 42 missing enemy bodies at Bao Hung.
So it's both a detective story and really a journey of mental healing.
Yeah, exactly, yeah.
And extraordinarily effective because of it. I mean, this man really did suffer, like so many of the vets, didn't he? And just really couldn't talk about it.
The subtext.
The battle was the biggest battle of the Vietnam War that Australians were involved in.
Yet no one knows anything about it.
Nobody knows about it, no.
Was it hushed up?
Well, I think because when it happened in 1968, it was at the time of My Lai. There were 27 Australians killed in it and 100 wounded. The politicians at home were suddenly getting very nervous about ratings and political return at election time. And Vietnam went from being a very popular cause in 1965-66 that all the boys were sent off as they were from various other wars, and suddenly it was on the nose, so the politicians didn't want it to get onto the front pages, and so it was basically hushed up as an amazing battle that the Australians won.
Brian is very impressive as a focal point for your film. Let's take a look at him now.
I was in denial.
How long?
25 years.
Long time.
To be in denial, yes. Soon after discharge, I knew that I had a problem because things that were happening. I just burst into tears. No apparent reason, just burst into tears, even though I'm in the middle of the party and have to go outside.
Post-traumatic stress, it's really a dreadful thing, isn't it?
I think that's a segue, Graeme, into one of the main reasons I wanted to make the film, because when Brian wandered in off the street in Fremantle and said, I want you to make a film about this battle that no one knows about, and I discovered in the course of that interview and thereafter that he, like so many of his comrades, suffered from post-traumatic stress, knowing that we were coming up to the centenary of Gallipoli in 3 years' time, and knowing that there would be the usual hoo-ha and fanfare about war being a glorious adventure and so on. But having made films in war zones myself since I made Frontline those many years ago and been ambushed myself in Cambodia with the Wilfred Burchett film and seeing what war does to civilians in places like Nicaragua and East Timor and West Papua and so on, I wanted to make a very strong, not in the old leftist sort of propagandistic sense, an anti-war film, but I wanted to make a film that would help redefine in its own way at the time of Gallipoli and the whole sort of thing about the nobleness of mateship and courage under fire. A statement would say, well, hang on, folks, why do we keep on sending our boys and now our young women over to frontline combat in faraway lands, be it Turkey in the time of Gallipoli or subsequent wars, with the exception of the Second World War, where I think Australia was directly threatened. And if we hadn't have fought the Japanese and the Nazis, then we would have certainly been talking a different language now, and it would have been a whole different story. So I wanted to make that as my token sort of offering at this time to sort of hopefully focus debate in something more than just sentimental patriotism and romantic fervour about war, making men, and so on.
You've always been a political filmmaker, though, haven't you?
I have been.
There's always been a political agenda.
That's my driving force in many ways. I want to make human stories, and I want to make psychological dramas. And I sort of think that by the time I'm 70, I'll turn around and do my Fellini or my Bergman sort of chapter. And under present-day standards, when I won't be able to get the pension, Margaret probably will have to do it, didn't say alive.
But you've also, Southeast Asia has been a magnet for you, and this was a film that drew you back to an area that you're obviously very fond of. Yeah,
well, like Graeme, my marble didn't come out at the time when I was could have been conscripted. And probably as a very conservative Baptist boy from the Central Coast in New South Wales, I probably would have gone off to Vietnam, and I probably would have, like Brian and some others, been traumatised and lived with the consequences.
Well, so would I. To explain that, I was in the second barrel. My birthday is the 7th of August, but the 6th of August came out and I missed out. But I was 16, I think, at that stage, and I would have been there as well, though I'd already planned to go underground. I had no idea what that meant.
Well, I wasn't as brave or as informed as you. I probably would have gone. But the point being, it was the motor to make this film, but also I've always, as a result of that, and Neil Davis and Frontline, I've always been fascinated by Vietnam and kept an eye on it. And so when the planets lined up, as it were, and the ABC and Screen Australia gave me a good budget with the Department of Veteran Affairs, and what we haven't talked about yet was going in and making drama with this. I really felt it was important to dramatise the battle, since we didn't have usual archival footage, and it happened at night time, so they didn't have the film stock to, even if they have had a Neil Davis at the side of Balmoral. And I wanted, having seen war myself, I wanted to give it a shot at being a drama director, as it were. Let's
go back to the recent past and Brian's entry into Vietnam and the area of the bomb crater.
2002 anh qua đây thì anh rất là sợ Việt Nam trả thù.
See these trees? Small trees?
Yeah.
There's the first bomb crater.
Yeah.
So obvious.
Thế anh mới nói rằng anh sang đây là đi du lịch thôi. Nhưng mà thực chất là động cơ của anh sang đây là đi tìm cái mộ liệt sĩ này.
This is the Bao Hung swamp where the battle took place. It's dry now, like it was back then, which is why we've got to get on with the dig before the monsoon rains come.
Hai nhân tham gia trận đánh đó, trong đó cái trận chỉ làm cho mấy chục người chết. Thành ra bây giờ lương tâm nó cắn đứt, nó buồn phiền.
Does making a documentary of such intensity, and all your films are enormously intense, does it take a personal toll?
Inevitably it does, in one sense, more to the kids and partner that I have to leave behind in Australia to go away for weeks or months at a time to get those most emotionally poignant moments when you finally crack the character to see who and what makes them tick for the audience when you finish the film. But at the same time, that personal sacrifice of to my kids and family life aside, I enjoy the growth process, because every film that I take on becomes a psychological drama in my own head and my growth as a human being and as a filmmaker. So that's what keeps me passionate. It keeps me going against the grain, even as the budgets get smaller and the difficulties to get them on.
Well, David, stay passionate, and congratulations on a really very, very affecting and disquieting film.
Thanks, Graeme.
Thanks for joining us. So let's take a look at a final clip.
Người phương Đông, người châu Á nói chung và người Việt Nam nói riêng là họ tin vào tâm linh. Cái vong linh nó rất mong muốn là phải để cái hài cốt ở gần cái vong linh đó, ở gần người thân của họ. Cái hài cốt của người nằm xuống rất quan trọng đối với đối với người Việt Nam và đối với gia đình thân tộc của họ. Thành ra là dù chết ở bất cứ một cái phương diện nào, bất cứ đâu, thì cái mong muốn đầu tiên của người ta là khi chết là người ta muốn cái hài cốt đó được chôn cất tử tế và được người ta được biết, được gần cái chỗ người ta ở, để người ta đến đó người ta đốt nhang cúng bái hàng năm hàng tháng.